Thank you for staying with us. Now, this situation in Côte d'Ivoire is absolutely on a knife edge. It's the same old tension, but with new faces in the firing line. The core problem is that the big opposition guns, that's the Gbagbos and Thiems, have been taken out of the race, basically ensuring a win for President Ouattara. The opposition's front commune is stuck in a painful limbo, and they say no election, but they are terrified to order a true boycott or even civil disobedience because nobody wants a repeat of the 2010-2011 bloodshed that cost 3,000 lives. This hesitation by the leadership has left a huge vacuum, which is being filled by the street. Now, you have activists like Gbagbo telling people to literally block everything, and the security response has been brutal with over 700 arrests already. What we're seeing is a high-stakes gamble. The traditional politicians are paralyzed by the fear of violence, while the youth and activists are pushing the country to the brink. Now, everyone is holding their breath, wondering if the vote on Sunday will be a coronation or a catalyst for a new crisis. Joining us, we have Dr. Mohammed Ben Suleiman, founding director, Center for Alternative Politics and Security, West Africa. Thank you so much, Dr. Suleiman, for joining us.
Welcome.
All right, so let's begin. The opposition's front commune declares that there will be no election, yet we see key leaders refuse to call for a clear boycott. Tell us, what does this strategic ambiguity signal?
First of all, I think it signals ambiguity in the opposition front, and it is embedded in history. One faction is looking at history, what happened in 2020 when there were not a lot of participation, and that these faction things gave Watara like an easy win. Mm-hmm. So they do not want to repeat that this time. But those who insist on, boycotting, I believe wants to deny the process legitimacy. They want to portray a lack of legitimacy, for the process, because if they participate, then they are actually saying that their, denial, the fact that they were prevented from being on the ballot, has some legitimacy, and it speaks to, the integrity of the process. So they want to deny the process that. So it's a bit of history, but also it's a bit of a calculation on the part of these actors who have analyzed the situation and realized that this is what we want to do that will serve perhaps our best interest.
All right, now, looking at the memory of the 3,000 death toll, from the 2010-2011 post-election crisis, how pragmatic a move is the opposition's reluctance to call for an active boycott?
First of all, there is a sense in which we cannot or we may not compare what happened in 2010-2011 to what is happening now, the current situation, because the security dynamics have changed drastically. But the boycott, those who want to boycott it, I believe, agree with me that the situation has changed, and they can actually really boycott the elections and not have their repercussions for the security of the nation. But given the fact that we have already seen a lot of arrests, and it doesn't look like Watara would hold back if he has to arrest more Ivorians, it suggests to me that that is a bit risky for the future of the country, and it shouldn't be something that the opposition should have done. I agree with those who want to participate in the election more than those who boycott in the name of peace, just so the process is allowed to go smoothly. Because whether you boycott it or you don't boycott it, the election can significantly be called. And there is no way, I believe, that we're going to have a new president after the elections. So, it's very risky. And I think that in the name of peace, in the interest of the country, that shouldn't have been the position taken by these opposition parties.
Okay. Now, what about with the key figures excluded, and activists like Paul Shiri leading the movement from underground. Is the center of the Ivorian resistance shifting from traditional parties to non-aligned street activism?
Yes, it is, and it is a reflection of what is happening globally. If you look at the terrain, I mean, neighboring countries like the Sahel countries, for example, you realize that the support that these leaders have is actually emanating from below, on the micro levels of society. So that is exactly what is happening across the world. There is a youth turn in politics, whether you're talking about globally or regionally or nationally. So that is a reflection of what is happening, outside of Ivory Coast. And I'm not surprised that these are the things that is happening on the ground at this moment. And these actions, the involvement or otherwise of the youth, the involvement or otherwise of civil society leaders, the legitimacy they give to the process will go a long way to tell us whether the process was fair, whether the process had integrity, or whether the process was actually rigged in favor of one candidate.
So, Laurent Gbagbo is notably silent. What does this former president's quietness signal? Is it a political compromise, or is he waiting for the political climate to reach a breaking point before making a decisive move?
Well, he's one of the actors who are calling for a boycott, and I think he's learning from history. He's been to the African Human Rights Court and he's been denied. I mean, he was there with Soro and they were denied. They prayed the court for them to be reinstated on the ballot, but they were denied. So I think he may have learned his lessons and realized that, he's not going to win and return to the ballot. And there is a sense in which he is still on the ballot because the name Gbagbo is still there. I mean, I don't know what is happening behind the scenes, but even if Simone is operating from a different party, I tend to think that the Gbagbo brand is still on the ballot. And there may have been Laurent Gbagbo may have been at peace with that, at least at this point, realizing that he may not be able to contest, at least at the time that Watara is in the government house.
All right. Now, we've talked about Gbagbo. Now, on the other hand, Vincent B. is treading cautiously as well. He's encouraging supporters to collect voter cards while refraining from a public stance. Does this affect voter apathy and the integrity of the electoral register?
Yes, it does. I think one of the things that the call to boycott would do to the process is that it may reduce participation. The voter turnout might be affected significantly. So things like this would actually improve the turnout. I think it will improve the turnout, and that is good for the process. That is good for the process. We know that at the end of the elections, the fact that Watara actually amended the constitution or reset the constitutional regime, the electoral regime of the country, to allow him to come, this being his second term post 2016, suggests to me that irrespective of the outcome, whether the process is fair or not, the opposition will still, claim that it's not fair. So things like this, operating within the law, within the confines of the law, and at least giving the impression that, the opposition is organized, to me, is good. It's good for the process, even if at the end of the day, the outcome will be questioned, which I think is what may happen after Saturday. Okay.
Now, Dr. Suleiman, President Watara is seeking a controversial fourth term, citing a duty to national and regional security threats as well. Does this justification resonate with a youth population that is increasingly demanding political alternation?
I think that claim of, continuing in power, claim of continuing in power because of security is coming from the rule book of autocrats. There is never an African country that's never had extraordinary circumstances in its government. So if we accept that argument, what it means is that Every other president, leader can say that because of extraordinary circumstances, security, globally, regionally, even nationally, I mean, he did quote a lot of the Ivory Coast is actually performing very well economically at this point, even though it doesn't reflect in the pockets of the people. If we accept that, excuse, then every leader at all would want to extend their stay in government. I give you an example with the Ghanaian president now. A lot of Ghanaians are calling for him to actually continue governing after 2028. But he came out clearly to state that he's not going to contest again because he served his 8 years. This is what we want to see people like Watara do. But if you give reasons claiming and blaming security and other things, then I'm afraid, unfortunately, there is never going to be a time when there is no security imperative in the Ivory Coast.
All right. So the government points to significant economic success as well, with the World Bank projecting 6% economic growth in 2024. Now, from your analysis, to what extent does economic performance cushion the government's democratic legitimacy? Tell us, what is the projection likely to be like if Ouattara stays in power?
I think to the extent that this so-called growth reflects in the pockets of Ivorians, it will go a long way to give Ouattara some legitimacy. Because at the end of the day, that is what government is supposed to do. That's what governance is about, to ensure that your citizens actually feel the growth that the country is enjoying. But more often than not, these growth figures are exactly that, figures. They hardly translate into something very meaningful in the pockets of the citizens. So I believe that if Ouattara wins or stays in power, I am using win very cautiously, but if he stays in power and the economic indicators keep on improving, then he may have a claim to make and say, yes, the economy is doing well. I mean, there's nothing wrong with me staying in power and things like that. But there is a problem here. It is a paradox I see here. If the claim that you want to stay in power is based on economic performance, well, it is because of the same economic performance that you were voted to begin with. So what we are saying is that I did my job, you gave me a mandate and I did my job, so give me more time to stay in power. I don't think that argument flies, it doesn't fly with me. But if he stays in power, he may have some legitimacy depending on how the economy goes, but he would continue to face the risk, I believe, of, unfortunately, an attempt to get him out. This is like a measured position that I think I take given what is happening in the sub-region. So yeah, I mean, he's walking a tightrope at this point, and he will continue to walk that tightrope post-election day.
All right, Dr. Suleiman, now speaking of post-election day, with over 700 people arrested, we're still talking about the protests now. They've been arrested since October 11. Opposition figures have actually alleged a police state. So how does this crackdown on the protests and dissent impact Côte d'Ivoire's standing as an economic leader in the sub-region?
I mean, usually it reduces, I believe, depending on what happens after the elections, it will reduce, investor confidence in the sub-region if you have a lot of violent protests happening, which I believe will happen. And I also believe that given that the government has deployed some 44,000, security across the country, that there's going to be a clash between protesters and security forces. That does a lot of damage to Ivory Coast. But the damage has already been, I think, it won't be as sharp, because since 2016, the Ivory Coast has lost, I believe, some credibility of being a democratic country, with Watara's constitutional reforms allow him 8 years more in government. So I believe that it will have impacted, but given the fact that it has not really been known to be a stalwart of democracy in the sub-region, at least in the last 8 years, that the impact will not be new to me. It will impact its reputation, but it will not be new to me, because already 2020 we lost 85 people. So if people die this time, it's not going to be new. And if it didn't damage the reputation of Ivory Coast then I don't see how the damage now will be any significant to be a cause for worry by the government that wins after Saturday.
All right, Dr. Suleiman, just before we let you go, one more question, because some quarters have suggested that Ouattara's victory is all but assured. So due to his rival's exclusion especially, does an election with no meaningful contest risk institutionalizing resentment, thereby sowing seeds of long-term instability? Quickly, before we wrap up.
Yes, I mean, what is happening now, it's a constricted contest. That is what is happening. And I think Watara is using legalities to deny pluralism in the process. So I believe that that is not good in the long term. And this is the reason why I worry post-election, because these oppositions will continue to feel that they were excluded and they were not allowed to be tested by the populace. And their supporters will continue to live with this denial of their constitutional rights, they would argue. And that will not be good for the next government, generally.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Mohammed Suleiman, Founding Director, Center for Alternative Politics and Security, West Africa. Thank you once again.